So this morning we will kind of continue with this kind of focus of ordinariness, or spirituality of Nazareth, or whatever we want to call this, kind of simplicity perhaps. And today we're going to be focusing on one of the evangelical apostles, that poverty. But I was going to reflect just a little bit this ordinariness of things. We find that I appreciate this morning, even in the prayer, we're remembering how we heard a siren come, and we know someone was being taken care of, or hopefully taken care of to the hospital, or whatever need is there. That immediacy is the ordinariness that you are in right here, and that you can bring that to prayer and to kind of attentiveness. And even just yesterday when I was with Sister Jenny, kind of just opportunities, meeting Pastor Joyce in the hallway. So having a nice conversation. I appreciated that. Yeah, we didn't plan it, and yet it was able to be something of enrichment. Even meeting a person I went to school with over in the village, kind of reacquainting myself with him again, and perhaps getting ready for a lunch engagement to, I guess one of the things with kind of retirement is kind of, remembering and kind of being grateful for the different people who come our ways in the ordinary things. And so those are kind of some things that are striking me even as I'm in this retreat time. What I'd like to do is begin today just with the reading of the passage from St. Matthew's Gospel, familiar one to all of you, I'm sure. Matthew's Gospel, that speaks about worrying about nothing, and dependence upon God. And this comes from Matthew chapter 6, and we're going to be looking at verse 25 and reading following. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds in the sky. They do not sow or reap. They gather nothing in the barns. Yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more important than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single moment to your lifespan? Why are you anxious about clothes? Learn from the way wildflowers grow. They do not work or spin, but I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was clothed like one of them. If God so clothes the grass of the field which grows today and is thrown into the oven tomorrow, will he not much more provide for you, O you of little faith? So do not worry and say, what are we to eat? What are we to drink? What are we to wear? All these things the pagans seek. Your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given besides. Do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. This kind of radicalness about providence, you probably have stories about it yourselves in your own religious communities. When I was in a meal with the sisters that taught there a little bit, the Sisters of Penance and Christian Charity, Franciscans of Penance and Christian Charity, Sister Antonella, a woman of wisdom, was kind of retired there. It was actually her hometown area, but she was able to live there in her last years. And I enjoyed always having breakfast with them once in a while on the Saturday mornings. And she would tell stories about their order and even the school there in O'Neill. They've struggled from time to time. Have any of your religious communities been struggling ever? What are we going to do? And then she would say, but we had, maybe you also have a strong devotion to St. Joseph. And this became her story of God will provide. We placed it all before St. Joseph, and then we let God provide. Providence was kind of the word she would be using quite often, and a trust that God would take care. So that's kind of the attitude, really, I think, that is foundational for this presentation a little bit on poverty. And I'm going to call it ordinary poverty. But you might say to the world, poverty doesn't even make sense, does it? So why do people choose it? And I would say how our people like yourselves lead this terrorism, poverty. It's actually extraordinary. Because most people are going to say, yeah, I don't think I could do it like that. You're talking about nothing on your own, in a sense, in a radical way, and then deciding to live together with people you don't really know. Is that a poverty? Maybe a challenge too. But so this idea of, I'm going to see God will provide. And this trust and confidence you carry with a lot of your life witness, even to this day, witnessing poverty. So what I'm saying probably just reinforces what you kind of already know and reflections you've made about how it is I live in poverty. When I get to thinking about poverty, I get to thinking that the main principle of stewardship, ultimately, that we used to emphasize in parish life is really poverty. Stewardship means everything has been given to us as a gift. That's really the foundation of poverty as well. Everything has been given. So we're not poor. Maybe we should change the vow to richness. I'm going to take a vow to richness. I'll bet you get more people signing up. The surprise you can tell later, well, how we need rich is really poor. I don't know how that will go over. That might be a little deceptive. But there's a part where there is, in this providence of God, a freedom and an enrichment that comes our way. Richer than we would imagine and how we could ever plan. And you'll have stories of that in your own lives. And so even in your prayer times today, maybe to reflect on this. How it is a gift. So in some sense, everything is given from God and for His purpose, and is really, this idea of stewardship or even poverty is about caring for what has been given to us. So poverty doesn't mean I don't care. Poverty means I care enough to trust that God has put me in charge of, or even to be a caretaker of the things around me. And what has been given ultimately is everything. It's not about having less. I wrote down here, it's about appreciating more, the simplest things. Perhaps one could say that stewardship or even poverty is derived, then they're kind of interwoven, you might say, they depend one upon another. Stewardship is poverty, poverty is stewardship. Poverty also might be described simply as the simplicity of life. And even in this busy kind of one more, take in more world we live in, people are attracted to a simplicity of life. They sort of say, I wish I could live that way. There's a desire, I think, all of us, to have things kind of taken care of. Huh? There's certainly a sad statement of our day in the number of storage units that are being built. I do kind of laugh about it, really, how I don't want to deal with it. Even in the Nazareth places of small towns. I don't know, our small towns in rural Nebraska are struggling. But when I see what is an industry of a life of the community is how many storage units they have, even in my little hometown, I think, this is stupid. But that's how we live. Even if we are in fringe places or even if we're in extravagant places, we want to hoard it. And we made a business out of it. And I would guess some of my own investments, if I would look, probably are supporting things like this. I don't know. And that's probably poor stewardship and maybe not practicing poverty, to not even know. Anyway, we need more stuff, we think. It's a growing industry. And yet there was a line, I don't know, it's just attributed, I always remember it being spoken by Pope St. Paul VI. Why don't we learn to live simply so that others simply can live? Because in a way, when you look at how much, and this is our indictment really to our own country, we could say is what makes America because having more and more means others have less and less. I do believe there's enough for everybody. But we, in our own culture and world, live in a different way. If I get more, then I can share it with others. But guess what? You don't. We might make efforts. I don't know how often my sister said, I got some more things for you to take over to Goodwill. Thank you. We try. And it's a way of kind of saying we're going to be generous and try to. But there's always a challenge. Are we really practicing our poverty? As Christians are prompted by grace, and we believe this to be probably in your own calling to be in a religious life, you're prompted by grace to be a giving person and not a hoarding person. If you said, I want to get more and possess more, I'm guessing your first visit to the religious communities wouldn't last. I'm here to get something for myself. That's not how religious communities find their charism. So I just offer a word of thanks to you, sisters, for reminding really the world, all of us who encounter you, not to possess things, but to share things and to give of ourselves. Giving is probably the look of what poverty ultimately is. It's giving, not being a pathetic person with nothing, but to be a giving person who has much to offer. So even to sharing our lives for others, that is a poverty. Can't I just take care of myself and even I'll do that first? Poverty would say if there is someone at the door, you are invited to help them. So it's not really exclusivity even to a person, but it's an inclusivity. And I think this is the mark of your religious communities. Even this, we'll talk tomorrow a little bit about chastity or about celibacy. It's not being exclusive to one, or I can have things just for my narrower group. It's inclusive of the whole human family. That's so big we probably can't take it all in. But it's an invitation to see ourselves as being more available. And your own assignments probably in your life and your own ministries have kind of showed that too. You're available for things that others could not do. I know in my life I didn't think about poverty. But my own celibacy allows me to be freer to be able to be with more people than just with a particular family. And that's its own kind of strange gift in a way. But it is a way of saying that there's a message of the kingdom of God that is for all people and not just for a small group. So in one way, women religious have shown poverty, and we can certainly be grateful for their witness. But I do think it's unfortunate that people say, well, good sisters, you're living poverty, so then I don't have to. Well, that's not the idea of witness. You don't have someone witnessing so that you don't have to do it. It hopefully invites others to do it as well. Because I do think when we kind of sense it's not for everybody, then it's an exclusivity that says it's for us. And that's not what the gospel is about. It should challenge every person to say, where is poverty in my life? True, it may be able to be lived out more radically and more particularly for you in your own religious communities. But poverty ultimately is a call for every follower of Jesus. And deeply rooted in the spirituality of Nazareth, I would say too, because it isn't a glamorous thing about the achievements and look what's happened with this and how much I've grown and how much I've been able to create. It's more about, see how I cared for the person who came to me and who needed something, and I can share what I have. That's a poverty view that actually makes a stronger community when no one is desiring to get to that top place while pushing others down. There's a whole countless witness of saints. I think some of you saw that icon that I did of Christ in glory with all the saints. Well, I can't do all of them, right? In the pictures, but there's a lot of halos up there. In iconography, sometimes it's empty halos, and it's to remind us we are all called to that way of holiness. of Hebrews speaks about there's a cloud of witnesses that proclaim Jesus Christ. And they are powerful examples for us. Sometimes we connect with different people more than others. Probably your own converses or religious people you know in your own communities have been encouragements for you also. And that's the beautiful part of a community that's living in poverty. We are sharing and being influenced by one another. So you could say the hospitals and the care centers, the schools and the cloisters and houses of prayer, they all are witnesses of how poverty has helped society throughout the ages. Particularly the women religious, the healthcare and education parts have been prominent in our own civilizations. What a witness, huh? Because of poverty, we have more to share for society. Poverty also ultimately makes followers of Jesus rich. So it isn't bad if he said, you want to join a rich community? I'm ready. Join us. And because then it helps us realize that we have enough, we can be rich, and we have more than enough when we trust that God provides. You know, I know most of us, even as I am recently retired, there's a whole different phases that happens. Then I start realizing my own health, and our own health is a gift, isn't it? It's kind of a precarious gift, and it forces us to realize our own poverty. We're able to do perhaps less. We're finding we can do things differently. It allows us to do much, but it also can keep us from maybe doing things if we ourselves end up being sick or disabled. It's interesting how then others need to be able to help us. That's a poverty too, to say, this is hard for me, I need your help. But that is a way too to say we're dependent on one another, because God has put you into a relationship with me, and so it gives us a hope and a confidence God's providing for me, even though I can't do this on my own, and I do need the help of a sister or a brother. When the gift of life offers suffering or sickness or incapacities, I suppose we could be tempted to kind of just, I'll do this on my own, or maybe we pamper it a little bit too much, or we cover our pains, or we say, well, I'm not available for anything else, and let me take care of myself. We try to avoid discomforts, fear to discipline our own desires. There was a pastor, I said, it was nothing negative at all, but I do kind of like going back to that, when I wanted to be a little more pampering. Every once in a while you'd say, well, you know, let's go have a dinner or something. You owe it to yourself. That's kind of an idea, which is kind of like, give yourself something. And there's a goodness about appreciating our own lives, but not to be pampering ourselves. We could be tempted to privilege. That idea can come to us kind of easily too, where we think because I'm not quite up to par or whatever, I can just kind of absent myself even from community, or I can kind of separate myself and isolate or whatever, and be privileged because I'm maybe not able, or I'm feeling some sickness or something like that. And I'm not trying to say deny what's happening, but can it be more shared? I think poverty would say that. It can also be a vehicle of service for all of God's people. I remember my grandmother, Mary, actually, she was my grandmother's second wife, was my grandmother I married. And my one brother's, I just know it's hard to go visit her because she's not quite there, and nothing really can change. But I said, but she's still an opportunity. Every person becomes an opportunity for charity. It sounds a little bit mechanical, like she's a person, hello. But there is a part where even a person we think doesn't have value, well, I think we thought she had value, but it was hard for us to be with her. Here's an opportunity for charity. How can you be a loving person to a place where we're not going to get any affirmation, maybe we're not going to get anything out of it? We're still going to be a loving presence in that setting. So every difficult person, I wasn't saying Mary, my grandmother was a difficult person at all, but there may be difficult people in our lives, and people say, this guy, I just want to stay away from him. I said, always an opportunity for charity, isn't there? And it does challenge us to think differently. I think today I would just share a little bit too about this Norma, who was a lady who just died recently, and I was privileged and honored to have her funeral up in O'Neill. Norma Scholl was a lay Carmelite, isolate, who ended up with much suffering in her later years, home bedridden probably for the last 15 years up there in O'Neill, but connected to a community of Carmel. The Carmelites, they claim a little more superiority in their religious tradition. Going back to Elijah the prophet, so how do you like that? I'm supposed to go back to God the Father at the beginning of creation, but anyway, they're serious about their idea of connection to prayer life and to holiness. Well, her life of poverty was something that she would have had lived. In some way, it was kind of laid upon her by her health condition, but also by her own choice in seeing a different way of living. It allowed her to be an instrument of prayer for the people that she knew by being handicapped or bedridden. She could still keep the world lifted up in prayer. Becoming Catholic and discerning a call to Carmel, her family pretty much wrote her out of the family's inheritance, and they were rather wealthy landowners, and she would have to give that up. Otherwise, she would say, well, I'm part of a church community now in the Carmel. Can we have our properties and all that be attributed to that? And the family said no. So she had recently embraced the grace of faith that kind of pulled her out of her comfort, or the comfort of that financial security, that she was ready to change, but it was basically being pulled away from her. And not necessarily even in a mean way, but people were saying that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so she kind of was able to set that aside. So even as her health was failing when she returned home, her wealth was also failing. But rather than begrudging herself, being written out of that wealth inheritance, and feeling sorry for herself and her health as it was waning and as she was suffering, it didn't keep her from witnessing, I can still be loving in this context. In some way, it provided a context for her to even serve her family. Interesting as it was, her brother wasn't so financially, he was financially astute, I suppose, but not able to be a business kind of person. So she ended up doing a lot of kind of helping in his business. Even though it doesn't sound, why would you do that? You have nothing to gain. But she saw it as a way of living a vocation. Rather than letting her suffering be just about her situation and expecting pity, it connected her truly to all who are suffering. And even connected her to Christ in his suffering, his death on the cross. This was always consolation with her, even as we study kind of monthly conversations I would have with her, either by the phone or in person if I was up in the area. John of the Cross is about John of the Cross because of the cross. Suffering is a part of our Christian life. And not that we're going out there, I can't wait to get that big cross. I remember a prayer service we had once in the seminary, and it was like, you got all these crosses on the wall, which one do you want? And the real pious one would say, I want the biggest one. Give me that biggest cross. But there's a part about the cross, this is part of our lives. And so can we embrace it? And she would do that in kind of a real simple way. She still had that grit. She was a journalist in her career life. So she was out there to get the story and address it in some way and active, but needed to somehow kind of curve that into a way that her call to Carmel was inviting her to kind of set some of that forcefulness to the world's concerns, directing it more to God and to his good and building of the kingdom. She was consoled by the Carmelite patrons of St. Teresa, St. John of the Cross, and St. Therese of the Child Jesus and the Holy Face, who witnessed suffering with their own lives, so she could find herself connected there. Poverty of health allowed her to grow in the richness of prayer, and in the ordinary place of her home. The Carmelites, they're not sure about this idea. Even Islip living in O'Neill and being connected to the Carmel in Sioux City, they kind of changed their rule and things on that now. But she was able to be connected to that community and still was. It was a great consolation to me at the day of her funeral that members of that community in Sioux City were there at her funeral. It said that we're connected, and she was connected to us. So that poverty of health allowed her to grow in richness of prayer in that ordinary place of her home. And people would take her communion, and perhaps some of you had this experience. Sister, thank you for coming, bringing me to Eucharist. And so some way, you also went into places where there was a holiness already in the people you ministered to. And you know this when you step in and you kind of sense this is a holy time, holy place. Anyway, in that poverty place set apart, it even brought about a restoration really in her family, not perfect, but she was able to be with them. And she said this would have never been able to happen if the call to Carmel had not come to her. So that's a beautiful story, I think, of kind of poverty that in a way of kind of God will provide. You know, sometimes the word with poverty is also associated with the word detachment. These are kind of, again, these would be words probably our own culture would like, huh? Where you need to be more detached from your things. We might want to get more things than the most recent thing. But detachment might be a good poverty word to describe our relation to things in creation. They are here for our good, and so we can appreciate them, even for our enjoyment, but they're not ends in themselves. Are you all philosophers? You know, the ends. We don't want to get into that whole thing. That's just, we want to get something for ourselves. That's it. They're not ends in themselves. They're helping us to see, God provides. There's enough for everybody. And yet detachment can sound a bit disinterested and unappreciative of creation. Some people will say that in some way too, making the world look bad. And there are evidences, of course, of destructiveness in our world. But I always love going back to Genesis. And almost every day of creation ends with, and God saw it was very good. The book, and I don't know if you read it, probably at my time, it was when we were all kind of reading a certain author who was been kind of like set aside. But he had a book called Original Blessing. Didn't you say the name got an empty box? But I think it set the context correctly rather than, did we first start with original sin? And we kind of blame Augustine for that. I don't blame him anymore because the Pope is Augustinian, so let's give him a little credit. There's a goodness that Augustine emphasizes, but God created us first with original blessing. So in some way, the things around us and even the world is a blessing. And can we kind of restore it ourselves or see ourselves restored? And we are by God's grace. So working towards that restoration of original blessing. Because if we were going to try to detach ourselves and say everything in the world is bad, well, we start caring less for the world. That's sort of what's happened. When we kind of let the world kind of, its mineral resources, its whole environment and everything lead us to kind of a destructiveness. That is what happens when we say the world is we can do whatever we want with it. That's a misuse of creation. And it's really a misuse of poverty to say that we don't care. Poverty says we care enough to invest ourselves. It can, but if poverty can keep one appreciative of even the littlest things, then it is a tool to cultivate holiness. So I think this is the way I'm writing about it, just to say that, you know, the littlest, simplest things, and I don't know how it is. I do kill ants when I see them on my counter, okay? But I suppose the true Franciscan, some of you I think carry that charism with you. You probably never kill a thing. But that's kind of maybe a little bit light of it. But there's a part where it can actually cultivate holiness in how we appreciate the things that are right around us. The appreciation of children and their spontaneity at Mass, I kind of like this when I see it happening. Even when I was preaching profoundly, I see a child kind of escape their It's sort of like, let the children be there and kind of enjoyment of the moment. It's not about me. Maybe that's the way to say poverty too. It's not about me, it's about what God provides for me. I like to think of poverty now of time, now that I'm retired. Even knowing death is nearer than when I was working and having a regular assignment, I mean, it's always right at the next door, I'm sure, but now it's more reflective. And even, for instance, this death of Norma, another reminder. So my monthly meetings and phone conversations with her take on a different way of living. And it's reminding me, I'm moving in that direction. But now, what I find is I can stay longer with a person when I'm with them, that I'm retired. I don't have to worry about, I got another thing coming up. And then, we kind of keep moving. Whereas now poverty says, be with who you're with. For some reason, this isn't a boast, but my wrist is very slim. I don't know what that's all about. So I quit wearing watches a long time ago. And so, but I'm always amazed when I'm with somebody and they're always looking at me, I'm here, but we are driven by time. Is there something more important than that moment you're with that person? So it's a challenge. I can't say I'm perfect at it because I do know, let's get going here. But the challenge is there. And I think too, I can take more time to stay with the person longer, maybe lingering with an experience that's happened because of more contemplative prayer I can enter into. Poverty of time also sponsors this gift of availability. And I think this is another gift that happens because of poverty. I have an availability that I wouldn't have if I have to go check on my stuff, make sure this is working. You get kind of caught in the rules things. Poverty kind of gives you a freedom of availability. I wonder, and this might be a challenge, I don't know if I'm going to try it, but I'll give it to you because some of you might try it. What if I let my day be scheduled by the events that come my way? I appreciate the fact that you did look at your clocks and you came here on time. But was that driven, or was it chosen, or did it happen? I don't know. This idea of freedom, what would happen if you lived a day just prompted by what was coming to you? I might try this a lot, just see how it works. I don't know. I might be kind of written off this guy, that guy's nuts. But I think it might sound irresponsibility. I know in some way it does, and some of us are more schedule driven. My own personalities, I'm kind of the German type, and I'm not really a type A personality where everything has to be, really organized. But there is a part where we need that. So it might be a challenge. But trying not to schedule a day might be an interesting exercise just to see how poverty is expressed in our time. There's one of the new movements in the church that God had given away. I'm sort of connected to a few of them. They're quite radical now. They understand living the Christian life. But they will, in their formation, take people for 2 days, maybe 3 days, and they say, we're going to drop you off in Omaha, figure it out. No money, nothing. You are to pay. And it becomes almost the Franciscan notion of, are you going to trust God providing or not? I don't know. I couldn't quite go that route. I don't think that's a little irresponsible for my angle. But what they find in their experiences is they will have stories of providence. I suppose, and this might be just a little thing to conclude with, kind of a funny thing. Can you be too attached to even poverty? Too attached to detachment? Austerity and extreme asceticism is that kind of notion. I would just be really even more ascetic and, pathetic is what it ends up looking like, I think. I don't think it's necessarily for everybody. There was a priest who had an associate. I didn't mention names because some of you might be able to associate. We're all different if you find that out. One priest lived quite austerely. And if he could give up more things, he would give up even more. The people you have in your own community sure, the radicalness of poverty. And then the pastor actually lived with much nicer things. And so in the same rectory, they were invited to love one another. Opportunities for charity. The one with the much nicer things was maybe a bit judgmental when he hinted to the austere associate he might be too attached to detachment. There, I got it figured out. You have a problem. And then the one that is in austerity and in truer poverty would say, well, you're rationalizing the call to poverty. But after all, he said that if you are such superior austerity, the pastor would often go on to say, such superior austerity could keep you from being relatable to people. And don't we know that in some way too? It's sort of like, that's just a little too much. So maybe there's a part, is that the Thomas Aquinas line that speaks about moderation, but still witnessing poverty? Well, I was going to have a few little examples, but they're just minor, but you can be more reflecting on it in your time. With the person of Mary in practicing this kind of poverty. She never really took a vow of poverty, and yet this notion was she lived it, not having her plan of life lived, but the plan that God had for her, open to that. The Magnificat is a great prayer that speaks about poverty in a way that we say, because God is the one who provides. Her great prayer there will speak about, my soul, me, I am magnifying you, God, for how you work in me. That's that idea of the Magnificat, I think, that Mary offers us about poverty. She certainly acknowledges her own poverty, identifies herself as a handmaid. I don't know, some translations might say slave. That sounds bad, doesn't it, in our language? But there's a notion of, it's not about me, I'm here to give service. So the handmaid is a poverty. This humility is a key aspect of her character, as she recognizes limitations and dependence upon grace. Otherwise she would be nothing. Even her own virginity, it says, is also seen as a form of poverty. It signifies her total dedication to God and her acceptance of her role in salvation history. So there's the part two. We'll talk a little bit more about that with chastity, but the idea of virginity, that's not a word that's very much received well in our culture or our world today, probably either. It sounds again like a little bit of suppression or oppression. Why would you be a virgin? Why would you practice celibacy? Don't you owe it to yourself to have all the pleasures? But we're saying, yeah, but there's a bigger vision. So Mary inspires us, I think, there too. And then she was there at the beginning of the church, which I find, again, a powerful witness of her own. I don't know what her role particularly there was, except to be an encourager of the church as it's born. Her life and actions reflect a profound understanding of poverty that encompasses both material lack and spiritual richness. Anyway. And just a little bit to say about St. Charles de Paul's, as I kind of said I was going to talk about him too. Here's a guy who was in the world probably extremely. He had a tragic kind of story of his growing up. His parents died when he was quite young, so a lot of things happened. His grandparents pampered him probably, but they were wealthy too. So he kind of lived in wealth. Some of you probably came from that, right? And yet, in this whole thing of conversion happened to him, he found it all to be lacking. So in some way, wealth to humility. So even realizing that what we had for our own possessions that we maybe were forced to give up or had to give up, we can also in that grow to humility. And so his will be a story of that. And then he went probably in a much more radical way, like I was sharing with you, that he says, I'm going to live, even try to find the lowest place, even lower than Christ himself in Bethlehem. So it's not, well, I don't know how that's going to work. But he would try to kind of even try to imagine being there at that lowest place to serve. He believed that by living simply, he could be good enough that others would say, if this man is good, then his religion must be good. respected him because he respected them. And so that was kind of his way of practicing poverty. He has the prayer of abandonment, which is, again, it's all in your hands, God. So that prayer is a great little bit that he makes some references as to it. I might even have it on the seeds of prayer sheet that's handed for each day. A little bit of the prayer, but you can find it, the prayer of abandonment. This abandonment expressed in poverty, silence, and service is especially shown to the poor and to the abandoned. So, I think that's all I was going to talk about here today as far as with our ordinariness of poverty. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.